Hablamos sobre los efectos de la guerra en la salud física y mental de los niños con la doctora Ayesha Kadir. Ella es pediatra, asesora senior de salud humanitaria para la organización Save the Children.
The effects of armed conflict on children are pervasive. So they can impact all of children's organ systems. And really, if you think about how children's health is more generally, children are, their health, their physical health and their mental health are both very heavily impacted by everything around them. So when we think about the way armed conflict impacts children's health and development, we think about direct impacts and indirect impacts. And so direct refers to all the combat activities. So shelling, gunshot wounds, explosions, also what happens when children are fleeing armed conflict. So there can be motor vehicle crashes, and also explosions. There can be unexploded ordnance on the ground as well that children can be injured by. And then there are indirect impacts, which are both immediate and long-term. And these have this is related to, for example, the destruction of buildings, of infrastructure. So children's homes can be destroyed, schools are destroyed, health facilities are destroyed, the public health infrastructure, where children go to get their vaccinations, for example, can be destroyed, but also lack of access to their basic needs, water, sanitation, shelter, safety, which is very much a basic need. They can be separated from their family, from caregivers. They can lose a parent. And all of these things affect pretty much every organ system. And what happens for each individual child will be different, but the patterns are clear that there are injuries, there are illness, also infections from dirty water, or from again, exposure to, you can have outbreaks, for example, because of lack of infrastructure, lack of access to water and sanitation. Malnutrition is in some places, there may already be existing malnutrition, but even in places where not, what happens is children who have a lack of access to food and water and who get repeated infections then can develop severe acute malnutrition. This is very frequently seen in areas where conflict occurs. And of course, all of this, what children witness and what they experience, and also what they hear their families and their communities speak about, even long after the conflict has ended, has really important impacts for their sense of safety and
Yes.
for their psychological well-being.
You've worked around past conflicts, but when you see the very crude images of what's happening in Gaza, or even what happened on October the 7th in Israel, what comes to your mind?
What comes to my mind is that this is once again effectively a conflict harming children. Children, every war, everywhere is a war on children, because the things that children need to be able to survive and to thrive are destroyed and disrupted in conflict. So it's heartbreaking to see that this is happening.
How does a kid express trauma? And in a particular war situation, I'm sure it's pretty evident. Or maybe we can also talk about resiliency.
Yeah. So one really important thing to remember is that when children experience adversity, they do not necessarily become psychologically unwell. They can express distress. Many children in some cases will develop trauma and diagnoses, but all children, when they experience adversity, they have to process it and try and understand it. And they can show signs of distress by things like they may start acting out, or they may withdraw. Some children will regress, so they will start acting like they are younger than their actual age. You may see bedwetting, nightmares or difficulty sleeping, refusal to eat. And a lot of children will also have what we call psychosomatic complaints. So they'll have stomach aches or headaches, symptoms that aren't explained by a particular illness or an injury, but they are an injury of basically it's distress, psychological distress.
Some of these children have lost both their mom and dad, and even brothers and sisters. How do you overcome that? And by that I mean, how does your organization, does Save the Children, work around helping these kids overcome trauma? What does it take? How long does it take?
So the most important thing that we can do is to provide them with their basic needs. So providing basic humanitarian supplies of, shelter, water, sanitation, food, but also making sure for children who have lost both parents, have lost caregivers, to make sure that they are in a safe place. So safety is really important. The most important thing we can do for children who have lost parents is to make sure we reunite them with family, who are really the best placed to provide them with a sense of safety and to make sure that they're safe.
Of course, many parents and governments around the world are trying to protect the youngest from what might come across social media in terms of these crude images of war. What's your advice?
Children will be seeing things and they will be hearing things. And this is something we need to recognize and accept. Not accept in the sense that it's not okay that this is happening, but we need to be aware that even if we don't speak about it with children, they will be seeing it. So actually silence is one of the most harmful things. The most important thing to do is to, when children, if they talk about it, to take time and listen to them. Don't interrupt them. Don't tell them what to think. Simply listen and validate their feelings